What's up, guys? So I was having this same conversation with someone on Facebook the other day. It had started out because I was wondering why we've already got Christmas decorations up in stores, and it ended up becoming this conversation on what the history and cultural significance of Halloween is. The person I was having a conversation with told me that it's an American holiday and that only Americans celebrate it, and he couldn't have been more wrong. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the true history behind Halloween, and if I pronounce anything differently in this video from what I did yesterday, because we will be diving a little bit more into some of that stuff again today, just know that it's because I've recently discovered that I've been pronouncing them wrong. So without further ado, let's get into this. Okay, so Halloween, also known as All Hallows Eve or All Saints Eve, according to Wikipedia, is a celebration observed in several countries on the 31st of October, the eve of the Western Christian feast of All Hallows Day. It begins the 3-day observance of All Hallowtide, the time in the liturgical year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints, martyrs, and the faithful departed. Hence why we get all of the skeletons and zombies and as ghosts and stuff as symbols. It is widely believed that many Halloween traditions originated from the ancient Celtic harvest festival of Samhain, and that such festivals may have had pagan roots. Samhain itself was Christianized as Halloween by the early church, but it does say here that some believe, however, that Halloween began solely as a Christian holiday separate from ancient festivals like Samhain. Its activities include trick-or-treating, Halloween costume parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires, apple bobbing, divination games, playing pranks, visiting haunted attractions, telling scary stories, and watching horror films. In many parts of the world, the Christian religious observances of All Hallows Eve, including attending church services and lighting candles on the graves of the dead, remain popular, although elsewhere it's more of a commercial and secular celebration. Some Christians abstain from eating meat on All Hallows Eve, a tradition reflecting in the eating of certain vegetarian foods on that vigil day. So eating things like apples, potato pancakes, and soul cakes, which are like a little bread bun sort of thing. So let's dive into Samhain to find out what the real deal is here. Okay, so Samhain is a Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. It is traditionally celebrated from the 31st of October to the 1st of November, as the Celtic day began and ended at sunset, like I said yesterday. This is about halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, and is one of 4 such seasonal festivals, along with Imbolc, Beltane, and Lunasa. Said all of this yesterday. Historically, it was observed throughout Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. Similar festivals held at the same time of the year in other Celtic lands, and this particular Wikipedia page lists some of them. Okay. Samhain is believed to have Celtic pagan origins, and there is evidence that it has been an important day since ancient times. Some Neolithic passage tombs in Ireland are aligned with the sunrise around the time of Samhain, and it's mentioned in some of the earliest Irish literature, and many important events in Irish mythology happen or begin on Samhain. It was a time when cattle were brought back from their summer pastures, and then livestock were slaughtered for meat for the winter. Similar to during Beltane, special bonfires were lit, and they were deemed to have protective and cleansing powers, and there were rituals involving them, one of which was, before the bonfire was lit, all the heating and cooking fires put out, and then relit using the fire from the bonfire, with it being believed to ward off evil spirits, and therefore bringing prosperity to the home. Like Beltane, Samhain, that's incorrect, Samhain was seen as a liminal time when the boundary between this world and the other world being one word, could more easily be crossed. This meant the Aoshi, the spirits or fairies, could more easily come into our world. The Aoshi are sometimes seen as the remnants of the ancient gods, particularly the Tuatha De Danann, and that they needed to be propitiated to ensure that people and the livestock would survive the winter. Offerings of food and drink were left outside for them. The souls of the dead were also thought to revisit their homes, seeking hospitality. Feasts were had at which the souls of dead kin were beckoned to attend, and a place set at the table for them. Guising was part of the festival and involved people going door to door in costume, often reciting verses in exchange for food. Now, if that doesn't sound familiar, then you've never heard of trick-or-treating, because that's literally what this is. The verse they recited wasn't trick-or-treat. It was actually a verse, and it was usually the poor children that would go door to door asking for food. But the fact remains that they would dress themselves up in a costume, and that go door to door asking for food. Similar to how children now go door to door getting candy. Divination rituals. No, I skipped a line there. Costumes may have been a way of imitating or disguising oneself from the Aoshi in order to protect yourself from malevolent spirits. Divination rituals and games were also a big part of the festival and often involved nuts and apples. If you've never been apple bobbing on Halloween, I think you're doing something wrong, because it is great. If you are like me, now an adult, watching people apple bob is fun in and of itself, but once you add alcohol into the players, it's even better. I find myself in a position where I can't really drink too much because of my medication, so I get the glorious pleasure of watching all the other drunk idiots try and apple bob. I'll come back to apple bobbing in a second, because there are two different versions of it. But I will continue reading this first bit first. Where are we? In the late 19th century, Sir John Rees and Sir James Fraser suggested that it was the Celtic New Year, and this view has been repeated by some other scholars. In the 9th century, the Western Christian Church shifted the date of All Saints' Day to the 1st of November, while the 2nd of November later became All Souls' Day. Over time, Samhain and All Saints and All Souls' Day merged to create the modern Halloween. Historians have used the name Samhain to refer to the Gaelic Halloween customs up until the 19th century. Since the 20th century, Celtic neo-pagans and Wiccans have observed Samhain or something based on it as a religious holiday. Neo-pagans in the southern hemisphere often celebrate Samhain at the other end of the year, about the 1st of May. And that is important to note because it actually means that for myself, even though this is the holiday traditionally that Halloween has come from, I will be celebrating, due to the seasons that I'm in, I will be celebrating Beltane. So I'll quickly sort of gloss over this. Obviously, this has less to do with Halloween than Samhain does. However, most commonly held on the 1st of May, or about halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, where the southern hemisphere currently finds itself. Beltane, where are we? In Irish, the name for the festival is La Beltane. It goes through some of the other ones. It's one of the 4 seasonal festivals. We covered that. It's mentioned in some of the earliest Irish literature and is associated with important events in Irish mythology. It's also known as, and this is interesting to note, as, God, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kitchamhain? Kitchain. I don't know. I'll try and put the word at the bottom here. It translates to 1st of summer, and it marked the beginning of summer and was when cattle were driven out to summer pastures. Rituals were performed to protect the cattle, crops, and people, and to encourage growth. Special bonfires were kindled, and their flame, smoke, and ashes were deemed to have protective powers. The people and their cattle would walk around or between bonfires and sometimes leap over the flames or embers. All household fires would be doused and then relit from the Beltane bonfire. So obviously they would do that twice a year sort of thing, when they were lighting these bonfires on these religious festivals. These gatherings would be accompanied by a feast, and some of the food and drink would be offered to the Aushi, again, it being a time where the border was more easily crossed. Doors, windows, byres, and livestock would be decorated with yellow mayflowers, perhaps because they evoked fire. In parts of Ireland, people would make a maybush, typically a thorn bush or branch, decorated with flowers, ribbons, bright shells, and rushlights. Holy wells were also visited, while Beltane dew was thought to bring beauty and maintain youthfulness. Many of these customs were part of May Day or midsummer festivals in other parts of Great Britain and Europe. And Beltane celebrations are largely held... Beltane's celebrations had largely died out by the mid-20th century, although some of its customs continued, and in some places it has been revived as a cultural event. Since the late 20th century, Celtic neo-pagans and Wiccans have observed Beltane or something based on it as a religious holiday, and neo-pagans in the southern hemisphere often celebrate Beltane at the other end of the year, around the 1st of November. And so the only real difference here is that this one sort of more focuses on life and youthfulness, whereas Samhain celebrates the dead. I guess it's sort of like their Day of the Dead sort of thing. Now, as I said, I was coming back to coming back to apple bobbing. There are 2 different versions that I have seen. One of which is hanging the apple from like a stick. So if you imagine 2 people holding up like a limbo pole with apples tied to it, sort of, I guess effectively like you're hanging them from like a noose sort of thing, and they just sort of hang there, and then you hold it above the contestants' heads and they have to try and eat the apple while it dangles and flails about above them. The other one I've seen is you get a bucket of water, put the apples in there, and then you actually have to try and pull out, using only your teeth, an apple from the water. I've done this myself, and I found that the best way to do, especially for the water bucket one, is you just pick an apple, you chase it all the way to the bottom corner so it cannot get away, and you should be able to get out of there pretty quickly. I haven't yet tried the one where it's dangled above your head, and considering that most of my friends are shorter than me, I don't see myself getting to try anytime soon. Yeah. So some of the things in Samhain that became parts of Halloween. Actually, I was looking up a thing yesterday. 2 seconds. Why? It's gonna want that as 2 separate words. Yeah. Just when I was looking up. I think it is. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just look at some of the symbols of Halloween, because most of these you can relate back in one way or another to Samhain, and so calling it Halloween is really just so that you can be more inclusive. So the first one is corn husks and stalks of wheat. I think hay bale maize is one of the most common sort of tropes when you're trying to depict Halloween in other forms of entertainment, like in books and movies. Can this ad go away? Thank you. Right. Yeah, so the significance of corn husks and stalks of wheat is pretty straightforward. Halloween, for the Northern Hemisphere, it should say that there, comes in the autumn. The traditional festival of Samhain celebrated at the end of summer and the end of the... No, it's not. Anyway. And the end of the harvest. So these images were meant to represent the end of harvest and the beginning of winter. Why does it say that it's celebrated at the end of autumn? Anyway. Corn and wheat are symbols of agricultural change and the change of seasons. There's nothing very spooky about it unless it's a decoration in your haunted hayride or a haunted house. All in all, it is one Halloween symbol that most clearly represents the pragmatic view of this controversial holiday. And I will put a link to both the Wikipedia page that I used and this website in the description down below. I think the other thing too that comes with corn husks and stalks of wheat is the scarecrow. It has scare in its name, and crows or ravens are often seen as being... there are some mythologies where the raven's believed to be able to pass between the world of the living and the world of the dead. In Norse mythology, Odin had 2 ravens. That could be where it's come from. And so having this thing that can scare this bird that was believed to be able to move between this world and the other world, obviously that became sort of a bit of a symbol as well. And obviously you make them to look scary. So similar to what we just talked about, we've got the colours orange and black being symbols of Halloween. They're most likely further representations of the time of year rather than Halloween lore or mythology. The colour orange likely represents autumn, when the leaves change from green and orange pumpkins are up for picking. I'll come back to pumpkins in a second because that's actually that's an American thing. As mentioned earlier, the Celtic Festival of Samhain marked the transition between the light days of summer and the darker days of winter. Obviously, with winter nights getting longer and longer, there being less daylight hours. So black likely reflects the dark days of winter when there are fewer daylight hours to attend to the fields and crops. And also the fact that all of the crops are dying. Of course, the modern secular Halloween retailers have certainly pushed the orange and black as official colours of Halloween trope, so such an explanation seems weak, but it is true. So yeah, pumpkins and carving jack-o'-lanterns. I know I have already spoken that Christians would light candles and stuff. There is actually a, I believe it's a British myth. I'm not sure if it's like England or Ireland or where, but it actually details the, it's after Christianity had sort of taken over in Britain, and it details a guy referred to as Stingy Jack. He'd been out drinking one night, and on his way home he came across the devil. He somehow tricks the devil into climbing a tree, and while the devil's up in the top of the tree, he marks a cross on the trunk of the tree so that the devil cannot come back down, and tells the devil that if he wants to come back down, he'll have to strike a bargain never to take Jack's soul. The devil obviously has no other choice but to agree, and so I think he scribbles out the cross or something so that the devil can come back down. Jack then goes on living a life filled with sin, and upon his death goes up to the pearly gates of heaven and is told that because of all the sin he has committed, he cannot enter heaven. So then he has to turn, and the devil, tells him he's going to stay true to his promise and not claim his soul. Therefore, Jack is then doomed to wander the earth for all eternity. As Jack is hurled out of hell, a burning ember is thrown out with him, and so Jack carves a turnip into sort of like a lantern. That's where the jack-o'-lantern comes from, and it's only once the British moved to America, where pumpkins are native, that they changed it up to being a pumpkin. Obviously pumpkins are much larger, therefore easier to carve, and the faces we put on them reflect the trying to ward off evil spirits from sign as well. So carving jack-o'-lanterns also has some history there as well. The next symbol we've got is spiders. Moving more into the spooky tales of the Halloween symbol. So obviously when you go to a Halloween party, one of the most common decorations is a cobweb, usually like across a window or up in a corner or something, with some plastic spiders thrown into it. And the reason they are seen as a symbol is because they weave webs, and that has long been associated with the passing of time, progress, and fate. The Moirai in ancient Greece were the spinners of the thread of life, and seen as weavers. So having, Athena is also a goddess of weaving and crafts and stuff like that, and she changed Arachne into a spider for claiming that she was a better weaver than her, and so spiders seen as being weavers, their thread protective, their web potentially being the thread of life, sort of brings it back into that Day of the Dead sort of vibe with spiders, but you have to go to ancient Greece for that, not ancient Ireland. Plus, spiders like to live in dark and sort of secluded places. They don't like to be out in the bright light. Similar to the next symbol on this list, which is bats. What have we got here? Right, so bats are nocturnal creatures, so it's natural that a celebration of the end of the light season and the beginning of the dark one would incorporate them. Additionally, during Samhain, when they would light the bonfires, that obviously would draw in mosquitoes and moths, which are drawn to the light, but that in turn would draw in bats, because they would eat the bugs, that it being their primary diet. So bats are likely a common sight during the early Samhain festivals and later Halloween celebrations. Rational explanations aside, it says here bats are sort of creepy, and certain groups thought that the little flying rodents were able to communicate with the dead. How they would know is uncertain, considering the bats didn't communicate with us. But however, once vampire legends made their way into Halloween folklore, the position of the bat was set, since it thought that vampires could transform into bats. And witch hunters were also pretty sure that witches could transform into creepy creatures like black cats, bats, spiders, and so on. Plus, vampire bats only feed on blood, and all things put together make bats a clear-cut Halloween symbol. The next one is black cats. I can pretty much boil this down as black cats particularly have their whole bad luck vibe, being a witch's familiar thing going with them. However, this does also say that ancient Celtic religions taught that cats were reincarnated souls of humans and that they were able to see the future. So not only have you got reincarnation there for the Day of the Dead side of things, but you've also got seeing the future and divination. Obviously they would play divination games and such, so there's that side as well. It's funny, it mentions here that most single ladies in the 1600s were thought to be witches, and just like today, many of the single ladies had cats. So in the 1600s, the local cat lady would have probably been tried for witchcraft. It's quite the irony. So yeah, the next one is skeletons. I don't think I need to bang on about this too much. It's a Day of the Dead celebration for the ancient Celts. Skeletons just make sense. The skull in particular is a symbol used by many different cultures to represent either the brevity of human morality, the fear of death, or danger that can result in death. It was also believed by the Druids and the Celts to be the psychic seat of the human soul. With skulls being a symbol, that's probably how pirates got brought into being a part of Halloween. I think one of the most common ones for pirates is seeing a ghost pirate, bringing both the Day of the Dead side of things and the Jolly Roger flag, which has a skull and crossbones on it, representing pirates, is likely how they were brought in. All in all, skulls and skeletons are associated with Halloween because they represent the end of the physical part of life, something that is connected to Halloween both because of the death of the light seasons and because of the perceived connection to the spirit realm. Ghosts, again, don't really need to hark on too much about it. The spirits of the dead. What are we doing here? No, I don't want to know more bizarre facts. Can we just... Thank you. As I said before, masks and costumes. They were to disguise yourself from spirits and fairies. Next on the list is jack-o'-lanterns. And I will mention this because I have already sort of mentioned it. Originally, the aforementioned guises, ancient trick-or-treaters, would carry hollowed out turnips, as I said, with candles inside them to light their way from house to house to beg and pray. Eventually, the tradition changed to carving pumpkins when they moved to America, and jack-o'-lanterns as we know them today were born. And then this just goes into a abbreviated version of the legend of Stingy Jack and then jack-o'-lanterns. It says that he was a drunk and a prankster, and he managed to make both God and the devil angry. Obviously, this one being a different telling to the one that I have told. He died, and neither heaven nor hell wanted him, so he was stuck wandering around the earth. He carried a turnip hollowed out with a candle inside to light his way, and to keep him from knocking on their door. The Irish would carve scary jack-o'-lanterns to put around their houses to keep him away. So, yeah, you don't want that sort of a malevolent spirit that even the devil doesn't want to take knocking on your door. And the last one on this list is witches. I think that this is more or less come from the sort of divination side of things, and the communing with the dead, all that sort of stuff, traditionally being seen as witchcraft, especially by the church. Yeah, witches make a lot of sense. Where are we? Right. I'll just read this whole thing. I'm trying to find the bit that I'm looking for, but I'll just read the whole thing. So the go-to costume for little girls until about 10 years ago, when we all started dressing up as Disney princesses, was a witch. It does say here, what was the central subject of most Halloween movies? Unkillable serial killers and mass murderers. Different than witches, though if you ask someone from the Salem witch trial era, the difference was not so great. Witches were feared, and it was believed that their powers were at their greatest on Halloween night. It was thought that witches were in league with the devil, and that meant burnings at the stake, dunkings, and worse for women who had never so much as touched a cauldron or a broomstick. Still, the image of a witch riding her broomstick across a full moon is one of the most traditional Halloween symbols or images today. On a different site, I thought it was this one, but on a different site it actually told me why a broomstick is the thing that witches traditionally fly on in pop culture, when there have been stories of witches flying on everything from a cupboard to a fork. I'm not joking, I'm actually quoting, I guess, this article that I read. But broomsticks were seen as a perversion of what was seen as the woman's role back in the day of cleaning the house. It gets a bit weirder with witches were supposedly had a like a flying potion. I don't know if it was like a dust or what, but they would insert it into themselves with a wooden stick. And obviously a broom being a wooden stick, They could have quite as easily just polished the broom handle with this flying gel, and then the broom would have flown. So it's got some really weird beliefs behind why a broomstick is important, and the cauldron. Cauldrons would have just normally been cooking pots. So if you're brewing up a potion, you probably would have used your cauldron. Yeah, I mean, it's probably most popular because of Shakespeare's Macbeth. But even the Grey Ladies from Greek mythology, who were 3 witches that shared an eye and a tooth, lived in a cave, and they would divine over a well. So any body that can hold, like any vessel rather that can hold a body of liquid, more or less. It's just that the cauldron can be easily moved, because it's effectively just a big ass pot. And so yeah, that's all I've got for today. I hope you guys learned something about the history of Halloween. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscription button and the notification bell. And all of my social media links and all of the links for all of the sources that I've used today are in the description down below. And so until next time, guys, night A2, and I'll check you all later.